So here for chapter 10, what we have is a chapter where we try to do interactivity where we can with just CSS and HTML. The problem or the challenge or the limitation really to everything you have done so far in the course is everything relies on your machine in order to run, right? So when you create layout project 1, when you create midterm project, when you create your hands-on practices and your case studies, all of that runs through your machine. That means there's no interactivity there whatsoever, right? You are producing content for pure consumption, the Pac-Man, right? Waka 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 waka. It's just eating the content. There is no interchange there of user and server side, so client and server, or in, unknown potential future client and, potential future product, whatever, haver, right? So the difficulty here is going to be that in order to look at a Web 2.0 interaction, so where you, the client, actually have a meaningful, maybe even real-time interaction with the service provider that you are looking at. In order to do that, we do need a client server environment. So that is a concern that I will tell you in my own personal self-interest is available in Web 102. The reason we don't do client-server interactions here in Web 101 is actually twofold. I would tell you that honestly, number one, front-end web design is what you are doing now. Back-end web design is the server side of things in that client-server interaction. In most organizations, those two portions of web design are totally separate. When I work with students on what kind of certificate should I get in a web environment? Should I get a server-side one? Should I get a client-side one? Well, it depends. What are you looking to do? Are you looking to design web pages for clients to see, or are you looking to design interactions with databases for, the service provider to see? And both of those are valid. We need both of those, honestly, because otherwise all we have is 1997 web pages that look nice, right? There's no interactivity there. Here in chapter 10, we do actually get some interactivity, but it's going to be limited. Let me suggest to you that the kinds of interactivity you're going to see here rely on a third-party client. Something like Outlook, something like Gmail, something like Mail, something like... Now, I know there's a Linux alternative, but I know it, probably is not very good. At least if it's very good, it's not very user-friendly. No, that's not true. If you only work for 1,000 hours on the code, you'll get it to work just right. Linux users, I'm sorry, I just don't have that kind of time. So I get distracted easily. So here we go, back to the material, right? Come on, Wolf, get back in it. So what we're looking here at in chapter 10 is basic interactivity. And I am not going to go through and mention all of these things. I just want to mention the difference between a couple of them. But what I really want to highlight to you is user interaction with mobile. A lot of the design, as a matter of fact, most of the design that you have been producing to date has, with its bulk, been aimed at a desktop user. And that's not the case, right? If 85% of discovery is driven by mobile, so that means, again, that 85% of the first time an unknown potential future client comes to your site, that means they did it from a mobile device, a phone or a tablet. This is my phone recording this right now. So the design should be first for the phone or the tablet, because that is where a vast majority of your clients are going to come from. Now, that's not to say that in some circumstances you can be aware that your client is going to come to you from a desktop environment, for example. If you are building a custom built website that acts as a software for a company, right? So we do this all the time for Eagle, right? Probably when you are interacting with RVC eagle.instructure.com, you are doing it on a laptop or a desktop, because the environment here it's just not optimized. So we, in fact, when we're working with Eagle, we can be pretty assured that first the client is going to be on a desktop. A laptop is the same thing. So when I refer to desktop, I mean desktop or laptop, but not a tablet or a smartphone. So some of the things we're going to look at here in Chapter 10 are going to have to be revised based on your knowledge that the client is probably coming to you from a mobile device. So some of these things I just want, and this is going to make the video here a little longer than I guess I would ordinarily prefer, but just so that you've got some background here, what I really want to start having you do is frame every decision you make as this is going to be good for the data. One of the things that this textbook does not do, because again it is focused on a client-side interaction, is it doesn't at all frame the need for regularized data. Now, I know many of you are like, I am never going to be involved in the data side of things, and maybe, but maybe not. So what I'll tell you is the following is an absolutely cliche but absolutely true statement: is garbage in, garbage out. If I allow for a user to be able to put in data that does not conform to the rest of my system, I have two alternatives. One, through intense, employee-driven going over of the data, I can reclaim that. That is not a good cost alternative solution. Or, number two, to be safe, if there's any data that doesn't conform to my system, I throw it away. And that's not safe either, right? Because what happens if you allow an unknown potential future client to join your mailing list, and you allowed a comma instead of a dot separator for the .com, .edu, whatever biz? That's your fault. And what I am telling you is the responsibility does lay with you, the web designer, the back end designer. So let's start to frame all of our decisions here so that they deal with getting in good data, so we know we have good data, so we don't have to spend useless amounts of time throwing away or reclaiming data. So first and foremost here, let me give you a page. It is 314. We have a text box. Let me suggest to you that a text box can be of any size, but the smaller the better. If you were to return an item on Amazon, for example, they will say something like, describe the reason for your return, 250 characters. So why would Amazon do that? Number one, so that you don't write a soliloquy about, the reason these headphones were too small. Alas, my head, it grew too big for headphones like this to fit. Not really necessary, right? The other reason why if we were Amazon, or you when you're designing your solutions here, the other reason you choose to do that is if you know every text field is exactly 250 characters long, that means that from one text field in an array, so all of your data comes in, right? So if I'm Amazon, I have hundreds of millions of customers, I have hundreds of, probably more than that, billions of transactions. And if all text fields are exactly 250 characters long, that means I know where one begins and the next one begins and the next one begins, it's 250 characters, 250 characters, 250 characters. That saves us a tremendous amount of processing time. It saves us a tremendous amount of storage space. So rather than because if I allow one customer to give me a soliloquy, that means I have to allow every customer who just says, "it don't fit," 3 words. I have to give the same amount of space there. I would rather, as a data engineer, I would rather give 250 characters because that is small, it's concise, and it leads to a good, fast server interaction there. So even here with text boxes, I want to be able to manage the data. As we move on through here, it's 318, the radio box versus check boxes. A radio box, if you think about it, just like in your radio, you can only make one selection from a grouping. So I cannot listen to preset 1 and preset 2 at the same time. Radio button. Checkbox, on the other hand, I can make multiple selections. So the example I actually think is fine here in the text, where we see what is your browser preference. Although it says Internet Explorer, Firefox, Edge, Chrome, Safari, Opera, Brave, Bold, whatever. Choose all that apply. And now I can have lots of them. That's the difference between a checkbox, multiple, radio, single. So there you go. A note here on page 320, hidden versus password box. Neither of those are secure. A hidden box simply says when you are typing, let's say you are typing out your secure password in a hidden box field. No matter how many characters you type, that cursor just sits there and blinks at you. That's why it's hidden. In a password field, you will see, now you can actually, through CSS, you can describe what kinds of symbols you would like. Do you want the asterisk? Do you want an at? Do you want smiley faces? What have you? I actually suggest just leave it as default. But neither of those are any more secure than in a public lab environment. So if I was at WTC recording this, I would be in a public lab, right? So the Mac lab, for example, only has 3 walls. That back wall is open. So if I'm going to put a password in, I would prefer for a password field or a hidden field, because then at least all of 1114 and all of that lab out there and anybody else who can see me from the hallway don't get to see it. That's a positive. However, when this is transmitted either via email or without any other additional concerns for the server side, it literally will say password field. Not very secure. So I suggest that even in the absence of real security, that a sense of security is positive, right? Because otherwise people wouldn't have, ADT signs. Is that even still a company? I guess I'm not sure. Or beware of dog signs when it's like, you've got a sleepy little puppy in there. Those are the sense of security, which oftentimes really truly is enough to provide some security. So think about that, because it's your responsibility. As the web page designer, you have to convey that feeling of false security to your unknown potential future client, and that's a positive thing. As we go on, my suggestion to you here on page 324 is the select and option field. These are what we're familiar with, a drop down, right? What state do you live in? As opposed to me just giving you a 2-character field where I, as the designer, have faith in you as my unknown potential future client to actually be able to put IL in there correctly. Nah, that's in no way, shape, or form the way most people, and I'm not suggesting that this is like a malicious ignorance, right? Where people are mouth-breathingly stupid, and at every turn you're like, you've got a zombie-like stupidity about you, and you're my average unknown potential future client. That is not what I am suggesting here, although I'm sure it is occasionally the case. What I am suggesting is that typing is hard. It's something that I don't do particularly well, and having seen, 10 years of code, I can tell you it's something that not everybody does particularly well. What we want to do is assure that our unknown potential future client, and we're going to start that here on 324, what we want to do is assure that our client has the easiest way possible to provide us with the data that we need. So rather than, trust that for the state code they can put IL in there properly, because 90% of the time maybe they can. But what happens if somebody mistypes? What happens if you're on an iPad and you hit the wrong button, or it autocorrects to something else? Now we have bad data. Providing a select grouping with options is in your best interest. And even though I would suggest to you that it seems like a huge pain in your butt to have to go through and type out all 50 states plus all, the Virgin Islands and Guam and America Samoa and District of Columbia and anything else I'm forgetting about, you can go grab a copy of that from someplace and include it there. So where possible, reduce the possibility of mistake by removing any real option to be able to do that. Use a select/option grouping. The last one I really wanted to talk about here it doesn't show up on my listing. It's for interaction. It is like a slider versus a spinner. We are familiar with them in some online forms, right? So a slider is just a bar with a divot in it, and you would say, like, please rate your experience from 1 to 5. Yes, I would eat here again, down to explosive diarrhea never coming back, right? So that's on a slider. It goes from left to right, and you move that slider over. A spinner is the same thing. Only you get an up arrow and a down arrow, and you would say, rate your experience from 1 to 10. 10, I had a good time. Or 2, I didn't have a particularly good experience here. Remember, your unknown potential future client is coming to you very, very probably from a mobile device. That is a nightmare on a phone. When you have this itty-bitty little spinner control and you are trying to get that just right, your finger represents an awfully large portion of the overall screen real estate there. And it's a guess, as far as your phone is concerned, it's a guess as to whether or not you meant up or down. Much rather just give them an option box, say select 1 to 5, and actually give them, 5 very good, 4 good, 3 neutral, 2 a little bit bad, 1 pretty bad. In so doing, you are, communicating everything you need to communicate to your unknown potential future client, and you're doing it in a way that helps address the needs of the device that they are very, very probably coming from. So that is the more important, I think, the more important takeaway here from chapter 10 is not the exceptionally simple HTML and CSS that you'll see here, but it's starting to frame these decisions that you're making in your web design so that your pages allow for good data in, so that you have good data out, so that you are creating an experience that your user is going to be more familiar with and provide easier access for them to actually interact with your site.